All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Have you ever actually looked at the clothes you're wearing, maybe that jacket you've got on right now, and thought about how it actually ended up there? And I don't just mean the literal manufacturing, I mean the journey of the idea itself. Today, we're tracing that path. We're going to see how a raw conceptual spark transforms, navigates this wild global market, and ultimately becomes the clothes we put on every single day. We're getting into the key concepts and terminology here, decoding the real architecture of art, market, and culture. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll be decoding the fashion ecosystem, looking at the foundations of creation, the mechanisms of change, the different market tiers, the lifespan of form, and finally, tying it all together with the life cycle of an idea. So let's kick things off with Section 1, decoding the fashion ecosystem. You know, fashion might look totally chaotic from the outside, but it's actually not random at all. It is a highly organized system built entirely on these four foundational pillars. If you look at that horizontal red line connecting everything, we start with the foundations of creation, which are your raw inputs. Then we move to the mechanisms of change, how those ideas get organized. Next up are the market tiers, basically mapping out volume versus exclusivity. And finally, the lifespan of form, which dictates the ultimate cultural fate of a design. Literally every single garment you own fits right into this framework. Moving on to Section 2, the foundations of creation. These are the raw inputs of making. Take a look at how these three distinct disciplines, art, design, and craft, are all united by the simple act of creation. Now, in the real world, these definitely blur together, but conceptually, they have totally different end goals. Art is driven by an ideology. It's all about provocation. Craft, on the other hand, is driven by the mastery of historical tools and techniques, resulting in cultural heritage. But nestled right there in the middle, highlighted in the matrix, is design. Let's actually zoom in on that distinction between art and design, because it's absolutely crucial. The main point of tension here is that art exists for emotional provocation, whereas design must unify aesthetics with actual function to serve a specific market need. Think about it. An artist could create a stunning dress out of fragile spun glass just to make a statement about vulnerability. That's art. But a designer? They have to take that same emotional concept and figure out how to make it wearable, comfortable, and scalable. At the end of the day, design is made to be sold and used. All right, Section 3, the mechanisms of change. Let's look at how these ideas actually propagate. It almost always starts as a trend. A trend is essentially a temporary societal shift. It's a transitory tendency spotted by forecasters and the media that becomes the overarching look of a season. You can think of it like a cultural breeze. You know, it's just in the air, and suddenly, boom, everyone is leaning towards a specific color, like neon green, or a specific silhouette, like those oversized blazers we've been seeing everywhere. But here's the thing. A trend alone isn't enough. A brand has to capture that trend and inject its own distinct signature, its DNA, to create a specific style. So, if the trend is oversized tailoring, a minimalist brand will interpret that with super clean, sharp lines. Meanwhile, a bohemian brand might use softer, flowing fabrics. The style is that unique aesthetic sensibility applied directly to the broader trend. Ultimately, that style is manufactured into collections. Sometimes called a range or a line, a collection is a well-defined, diligently edited group of products. This is the seasonal, executable, physical reality of the trend and style. It's what you actually see hanging on the racks or scrolling past online every season. Let's look a bit closer at how those trends physically spread using what the industry calls the coattail effect. It starts at a single origin point, where innovators spot a sociocultural stimulus. Then, the rest of the apparel industry takes notice and jumps on the bandwagon. Brands capitalize on this new theme and rapidly pump out their own localized collections. And finally, we hit the flow. This is where the trend spreads across all the different market tiers until it absolutely saturates the market, and while the trend eventually loses its edge. That brings us to Section 4, the market tiers. This is where we get into volume versus exclusivity. Notice the shape of this pyramid here. It brilliantly exposes a massive duality in the industry. If you follow the arrows, you'll see that as you move up the pyramid, price, craftsmanship, and exclusivity skyrocket. But as you move down, volume and accessibility increase. The reality is, the fashion industry absolutely relies on those exclusive top tiers for creative vision and publicity. But it entirely depends on the high-volume bottom tiers to generate its actual global revenue. Let's start right at the absolute pinnacle, avant-garde fashion. This is the vanguard. We're talking about a tier of purely experimental designs that stretch the boundaries of existing norms. Honestly, these pieces are often deliberately unwearable and are definitely not meant to be commercially viable. So you might wonder, why do brands pour millions into them? Well, it's all about business value. They act as a beacon, generating massive brand buzz and publicity that eventually drives the sales of their much more accessible halo products. Think perfumes, cosmetics, and handbags. Stepping down the pyramid, we hit this massive gap between haute couture and prêt-à-porter, which is also known as ready-to-wear. Haute couture is the elite of the elite. It is custom-made for individual clients with intense craftsmanship, and it is never duplicated. It's the ultimate brand halo. But prêt-à-porter, that's where the business actually scales. These collections might take cues from the couture lines, but they're manufactured in standard, multiple sizes and colorways. The key takeaway here is that ready-to-wear is the true core driver of retail growth for major fashion houses. Finally, the idea hits everyday reality at the very bottom of the pyramid. This is mass fashion, providing practical volume for a huge cross-section of society. It's affordable, it's in nationwide stores, and it's what the vast majority of us actually buy. And then, kind of lurking in the shadow of the industry, we have knockoffs. They step in to reproduce those high-end looks on the cheap using lower production costs. And while they do democratize popular styles for everyone, they raise some severe intellectual property and copyright issues that the industry is constantly fighting. Moving on to Section 5, the lifespan of form. What is the ultimate cultural fate of these designs? Check out this consumer adoption graph. The data here shows two radically different lifespans. That steep red line represents a fad. Fads experience incredibly fast acceptance, just a massive spike in adoption, before completely saturating the market and burning out instantly. They become outmoded overnight. But that gray line, that represents a classic. Think of a crisp white button-down shirt or the little black dress. A classic endures, needing only minimal modifications over a massive span of time, basically defying obsolescence altogether. This quote perfectly captures why legendary creators strive to make a classic. When Ralph Lauren says, "I believe in design that has lasting integrity," he is hitting the nail on the head regarding the ultimate goal of design. It's about prioritizing lasting cultural utility over a fleeting, high burnout moment of market saturation. And finally, Section 6, the life cycle of an idea. Let's look at the fashion gravity model. The fashion gravity model flawlessly summarizes this entire journey. If you follow the red thread, we see how a foundational spark at Genesis, born of art, design, or craft, is introduced way up at the top as avant-garde fashion or haute couture. Then gravity just takes over. The idea gets pulled downward through dissemination, sparking a trend and a distinct style. It scales down through the market tiers, getting manufactured as prêt-à-porter, then mass fashion, and inevitably cloned as knockoffs. Finally, at the very bottom, it meets its ultimate fate. Depending on its cultural weight, it either burns out instantly as a fad or achieves immortality as a classic. So to wrap up this explainer, I want you to go look in your own closet and ask yourself, where does your favorite item of clothing sit on the fashion gravity model right now? Is your go-to jacket just a fleeting mass market fad that you're going to toss next season? Is it a premium ready-to-wear piece? Or is it an immortal classic that has totally defied the gravity of obsolescence? Once you understand this ecosystem, it doesn't just change how you see the industry, it completely changes how you see the functional art you choose to wear every single day. So what's hanging in your closet?